are live. The recording is on. And so everyone on the call, this is recorded. So if you turn up on your camera, you might end up on YouTube. But that should be okay, I guess. This is SQL Friday number 103. And today we have Armando Lacerda or Kerda?
Lacerda.
Lacerda. Who is joining from today from Texas, originally from, well, he lives in California and comes from Brazil, which we just talked about. Armando is going to talk about hybrid disaster recovery with the SQL 2022, which is, there are some cool features added to SQL 2022 and managed instance, I guess you will talk about as well for the hybrid DR. So welcome, Armando. This is your first time on SQL Friday, I think. So
yes, it is.
The stage is all yours. So whenever you're ready to start.
All right, great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Magnus. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon for you, I think, if you're connecting from Germany. Good early morning if you are here in US in the same time zone that I am at. My name is Armando Lacerda, and I was talking to Magnus. You know, are you an early bird or a nightly owl? It depends on the time zone you are, right? So in my time zone now, very early bird. But I usually like working at night when it's calm and not that many people, you know, disturbing you. But anyways, let me get my slide deck up in here and share my desktop. Let me see, where are you? Here, you're here, and let's share this. Okay, actually, because I'm in a hotel here in Austin, my monitor situation here is different than home. So let me do it differently. You share here. There we go. And perfect. And you there, share this guy. All right, I believe you can see my desktop now, right?
I can see it, yes.
Great. So let me get.
Now you're muted, Armando. Armando, you don't have sound. You're muted.
Teams, you gotta love Teams, right? It mutes you right when you get it started. All right, so yeah, again, my name is Armando Lacerda. In case you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going after the session. I love to make new friends in LinkedIn. I used to have, actually, let me take that one down. I used to have a Twitter account, but I deleted the other day. It was too much noise. You know, people, a lot of people talking a lot there. Things I'm not of my interest, so I decided to remove that guy. So I don't have that one anymore. And yeah, so if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll be honored. I usually post once, twice a week about something new I learned on the data platform in Azure. It can be SQL, it can be Synapse, it can be Cosmos, it can be Power BI. I used to be a developer. I'm still a developer at heart because I'm a data engineer, so you have to write code from time to time. But yeah, so if you want to, you know, keep pace with me, and if perhaps after the session is over, if you have questions I didn't answer, we didn't have time to answer here, you're welcome to connect on my LinkedIn account. I'm also, I mean, I do have an email. It's going to pop up here when I browse Azure. You're going to see my email there. But who uses email nowadays, right? And social media is way better. Yeah, I'm a Microsoft MVP as well on the data platform. And MVP is an award that Microsoft gives to professionals like you and me when we share our knowledge with the community and then try to, you know, improve the community and using Microsoft technology. Actually, it's not just Microsoft technology nowadays. It's, you know, the cloud technology, which includes some open source solutions like Kubernetes and Postgres and some other elements around the data platform and infrastructure as well. So I challenge you. Should be next Friday. You should be here in my place. Actually, there is somebody else already scheduled, but talk to Magnus, get a session, start sharing, blogging about what you know. You may get noticed, and if you do, Microsoft may award you the MVP award. It's not a technical certification; it's an award for your contributions with the community, which is a pretty cool thing. I'm very honored to have that particular title. I'm also a Microsoft MCT, which means I deliver Microsoft classes. The Microsoft partners, they call me to teach classes on their technologies. And because of that, I invest a lot of my time getting certified, because in order to teach a Microsoft class, you have to be certified on the topic. So if you look at my transcript there at LinkedIn, you're gonna find like 100 certifications there. It's just because of this hat that I wear, which is the trainer hat. So please connect with me on LinkedIn, and let's keep the conversation going there. The topic for today is hybrid disaster recovery, and in a way, high availability as well. And I have 4 topics here, actually 3 topics. The last one is just Q&A. So let's get straight to it. Let's see what I want to cover here. I actually made this session because I was pretty much all my sessions. I come up with the idea for the session after finishing a project usually, or when I'm in the middle of the project and there is a discussion and I have to explain to my customers. I'm an independent consultant. I have to explain to customers, how things work. So when SQL Server's coming out, was still in preview, there was always this conversation with a group of my customers about how to better implement high availability. I actually have a close friend that works for this financial institution where they run their SQL Server, right? They have their building there. They have their building there, and they have their local data center in that building, and they're down there in Florida, and they have actually a service provider. Let's call it here the colocation. They have a service provider where they have a bunch of VMs there, and they have in these VMs they have SQL running on these VMs. And what they do, it's something you see, it's very common, right? A very common installation, very common deployment. They have the local data center SQL Server syncing. It's not the database itself, not the instance, but the VM, right? They ship snapshots of the VM throughout the day, that many times throughout the day, to that other location. So if the data center goes down for whatever reason, they're in Florida, so they can have hurricanes. It's very common. It's not in the season yet, but they have when it's in season, they always test these things. And they ship this is actually how they work today. They ship those things to that location. And they were going through a review process of this one. They kind of, is this the best way, the smart way to do? I remember when I was doing this kind of thing way back, a few years ago. We used to do backup for disaster recovery. Now, this is kind of a high availability scenario. But when I was doing a disaster recovery, we used to do the backup tapes, and then to 2 tapes, doing simultaneously to 2 tapes, and send 1 tape out of town. So the company I was working for was down there in Miami, and we sent 1 tape to Georgia, the other tape to North Carolina. The idea was to have somewhere over 600 miles away. That was the mindset, to get something that's at least 600 miles away, because if the hurricane goes by, it's not going to hit 2 places at the same time. It has to be that far in the distance. So yeah, we are all familiar with this. And SQL Server, for a long time already, it's implementing that technology called distributed availability group, right? I believe you are familiar with that one. You may have heard about that one. And the idea of a distributed availability group is to do differently than my friend, this particular financial company in Florida, is doing. Instead of shipping the VM, right? You set up SQL instances, and they communicate between each other, and they send just the database information, right? Just the transactions that are going on in the database from one SQL instance to another SQL instance. So you can do this syncing either on the OS level, right? The VM OS level, or at the SQL level, right? At the SQL instance level. And if you do the SQL instance level, in the past, when we used to do everything on the same site, right? On the same, if you're using the same data center, you do failover clusters. It was a very common scenario a few years back. After distributed availability groups came along, there was a kind of a migration of people using like, let me move this down here. Getting the distribution availability group supporting high availability instead of using failover clusters, right? What we're gonna see today is an evolution of this scenario that's available. Actually, it's still in preview, and you have to enable that thing with Microsoft if you want to try it out. But Microsoft is inviting everybody in. Okay, let's come in and I show you. We get that working for you. So the idea of this one here of the session today is to focus on this approach. And instead of the colocation site here, instead of the colocation site, what we're gonna have in here is the Azure cloud, Microsoft Azure cloud. And of course, instead of doing the VM, we're gonna do SQL. We could do VM, right? There are ways to do VMs. And if you want to check that one later, if you're not that familiar with this yet, there are levels of migrating workloads into the cloud. One of these levels is called infrastructure as a service, and the other one is called platform as a service. And when you do VM, you do infrastructure as a service. If you do what we're gonna do here now, we're gonna talk about here now. When you're using a particular service on top of that will be running on the VM, then you're doing platform as a service. So what we're doing here is what Microsoft says it's the best way, the desirable way of leveraging things in the cloud, which is using platform as a service, because you have way less management. As we're gonna see here, you have way less management to deal with. And yeah, it's just easier. So we can focus more on business and solving companies' business problems. So this is just to set up the scenario so we understand what we're talking about, right? Just as a summary, we're talking about high availability and disaster recovery. I'm not going to go in there. I'm going to move straight into the slide now, but keep in mind, right, that high availability is one thing, disaster recovery is something else. So to the latter, what we're doing here is high availability, because we're going to have a service that will be standing by to take over if something happens to my primary service. So that's high availability. Disaster recovery usually involves restoring a backup, and there will be some time offline time while you do the process of restoring a backup. It's when you have to build the whole thing from ground up. This would what we're going to see here would also allow for that because we are in the cloud, we are in platform as a service, so there will be backup and restore support for that as well. But the main focus here is high availability with disaster recovery. With that in mind, I forgot to mention that if you guys have any questions as we move around here, right, moving through these topics in here, please, you can interrupt me, jump on the microphone. I'm not watching, monitoring the chat window. I'm looking at my main screen here all the time. The Teams is out there. I'm not looking at the chat window. So I'm gonna ask Magnus, if something pops up on a chat window, just let me know, all right? I'm from Brazil, so we have this Latin culture in family. You know, we always speak over each other, so we're not going to be rude if you interrupt me. Don't worry. All right, so let's take a look on this guy here, right? SQL Managed Instance. What is this? Yeah, so before I get in there, let me get here the Azure portal. Let me show you some stuff here in the Azure portal. Let me do this here. I was trying to fix an issue here, connecting to the VM. Hopefully that's fixed. But if I go here to my Azure subscription, and let me get this here a little bigger so you guys can see it better. And you see, this is my email, me@armandolacerda.com. You can email me on this one. Please do not email me on this one here, right? This Hotmail one here. This one is just my ID with Microsoft, to access my resources there. I have this account here for, I mean, almost 30 years, I think, and it's full of spam. I never waste any time trying to read emails from there. So don't email me on that one, right? Email me on me at armandolacerda.com if you like, or LinkedIn, like I mentioned before, is way better. All right, so if I go here into Azure SQL, this is Azure, of course, right? And we are browsing the portal here to manage Azure resources. And these are some of the, as you can see, I do a lot of demos and I have a lot of sessions. I have my infrastructure there for a bunch of things that I do. And if I want to have a new SQL here, I can come here and click on Create. And Microsoft, in terms of SQL offerings in the cloud, Microsoft gives you over 200 options. If you count the specific changes and settings you can do in every SQL, it's daunting, right? It's a lot of SQL options in there. Because every single variance, when you add more memory, when you add, is pretty much memory or cores or DTUs, depending what you do, it's a new offering, it's a particular offering. So they organized this whole thing into these three offerings in here, right? SQL databases, managed instance, which we'll be looking at, and virtual machines. And if you can recall, let me get zoom in here just quick. Whoops. My wheel here sometimes doesn't work well. If you can recall, where's my mouse? Mouse is here, text here. If you do virtual machine, right, like I just mentioned, you're doing infrastructure as a service, right? And if you're doing SQL databases, you are doing platform as a service, right? This pretty much the two elements in there. Our session today, we're going to focus on this guy here, right? SQL Managed Instance. So what is what is it, right? It's right in between both. Well, Microsoft says that this guy here is also a platform as a service offering, right? Do you only have VMs as infrastructure as a service? And as a rule of thumb, that's usually how it goes. If you're looking to VMs or infrastructure elements, it is infrastructure as a service. If you use anything else, more likely you are using platform as a service. Sometimes you are in software as a service. And that's where you want to live, right? You want to live in platform as a service. But if Microsoft already had the SQL databases as platform as a service, why do I need a managed instance? Why we're focus on managed instance? In a nutshell, the answer to this question is this. Even though everything is SQL, the SQL we deploy, we use on-premise is not compatible in terms of infrastructure elements like data files, file groups, backup file formats, and these things. It's not compatible to the SQL we have in the cloud, to the Azure SQL database, right? This guy here, to the Azure SQL database. So it's like you cannot back up a SQL database you have on-premise on a virtual machine and restore in Azure SQL database. You cannot do that because the way Microsoft designed the SQL database to work was for the cloud. It was a bunch of new different stuff under the hood, right? Underneath the surface. And Microsoft is the one to manage this. And they're like, this is my stuff. It's platform as a service. On the surface, it will be almost everything 100% comparable. TC will be there. You can run your application. It's going to be fine. But infrastructure, I will manage for you. And therefore, there will be things there that are incompatible. So this thing about not being able to restore a database from a VM into SQL database was a bump, right? It was not really cool. If you want to migrate data, you have to create jobs like going to integration service or going to Azure Data Factory and move the data over, or even go BCP, whatever you want to do. So managed instance, the one we're talking about now, this guy here, it came to fill this gap. So we still have an infrastructure where we don't manage. Microsoft will manage it for us, but we'll be closer and somewhat compatible to what we have on-premise running on a VM. So the communication between these two guys here it's better, right? And specifically on infrastructure, and what I'm talking about here, disaster recovery, right? It's all about the infrastructure. So that's why you're talking about virtual machines. So in a nutshell, talking about managed instance, I rather say. So in a nutshell, a SQL managed instance is a SQL server, is a regular SQL server up in the cloud that has a greater level of compatibility of SQL Server that we run on premise in terms of infrastructure and the ability of exchanging data between each other. Yeah, and because of that, it does support scenarios of high availability as we're going to explore it, right? So there are more. Of course, we could talk about managed instances. I have some slides that are coming up that will go into some specific aspects of managed instance. Just to wrap it up here on the setting it on the SQL offerings, you can run managed instance both on Azure Cloud, right, running on Microsoft physical data centers somewhere around the world. There are over 60 of them, I think. Or you can extend the cloud to your own data center and have your servers hosting Microsoft Azure Cloud Service. So you can get managed instance to run on your own data center, and then your data center becomes an extension of the cloud. So, there is clouds, there is fog. I call this the mist. It's right in between, right? When you run it on your data center. So what we're talking about here works either way. All right, so back in here, this is the managed instance. And what do I care about the managed instance? Well, I was really simplistic when I was here on my drawings. If if I'm really up to create my own disaster recovery, right, the distributed availability group, and with my own company's resource, so I know I will have to do 2 VMs running SQL on one side of this thing. And, they have their databases and they're communicating between each other. If I'm really serious about this, I will have this infrastructure here kind of replicated. Come on, there we go. Kind of replicated somewhere else in another physical location. And I have to manage this whole thing, right? That's the point I want you to focus on at this moment. You would have to manage this whole thinking here in terms of all of these VMs and what they do, the configurations. Everything is set in the most optimal way, and the applications need to be able to talk to either VM depending on the particular situation, right? If the service is up, if some link is down, and all of that. When you go into manage instance, a lot of these things are resolved for you. Pretty much most of these things are resolved for you. When you look into manage instance, kind of introduced this one already, so we can move past this slide here. When you go into manage instance, this is a busy slide. By the way, these slides here I got from Microsoft. I think I stole this one here from Bob Ward. he makes his slides free on his GitHub repo. And I was like, Bob, I'm gonna present this one here. I was a couple months ago. Can I use your slides? I said, yeah, go there. So most of these things I got from him. So SQL managed instance, this kind of describes a lot of features in there. What I really want to call your attention to on this managed instance here is this first. This is very important. Because, if you're doing disaster recovery or high availability, I'd rather say, if you're doing high availability, it means your application will move from one server to another server if the primary server fails. Now, you got to make sure that the other server is compatible with your application, right? So make sure you look into browse that particular link in there and see if your application depends on something that's not supported in managed instance. If you fall in there, don't go, don't do anything that I'm talking about in here, right? But yeah, otherwise, it's a good option. There are few elements, very few elements that are not really compatible. There you can check the details. One of the things that managed instance does support that the regular SQL offering in Azure platform as a service does not support is the SQL Server agent, right? When you're running on premise, you need SQL Server. We use SQL Server agents for everything. But when you go to the cloud, the first thing you miss is, where is the SQL Server agent? Well, good news, the managed instance does support that. So that's a good thinking there. Another thing to keep in mind is this, right? It does not come with support for the other services that come in the box when you get SQL Server. So if you need that support, you can get some of these things supported. You can have SSIS database into managed instance, but you cannot have the process itself, right? You cannot run on the same VM in managed instance because you don't see the VM whatsoever. It's completely hidden from you. Besides that, most of the things are good in managed instance. Now, this one here is the one that I believe you're going to appreciate the most. I'm going to go back here to my scratchbook here, this guy, right? Remember this thing here? You have to implement your on-site. You have to deploy your VMs and get everything configured and the whole thing. When you do manage instance, this is what you get. You get that site that I was talking about that looks like this, right? In a simplified way, it looks exactly like this. So you are, let me zoom in here just on the structure for now. I will look into the other elements in there in a few. But you see, you are, where is my pins there? You are in the cloud, this right here, right? You are in the cloud. This whole thing is running in Azure on a particular Azure data set that you come to choose. So it's somewhere in there. And when you deploy, when you go to the portal, the Azure portal, and deploy the managed instance, what's going to happen behind the scenes is this: you will get, where's my mouse? There we go. You will. I'm getting a hard time here with the mouse. Let's try this way. You will get here a SQL Server engine, right? That's running there for you in one of these primary nodes. And you, by deploying one managed instance, you will get multiple nodes. So you get a primary node, and there will be other nodes depending on the SQL, the managed instance offering you come to choose. So you're going to have multiple nodes, and these multiple nodes can be on the same data center or can be even distributed in between distinct data centers and distinct regions, right, across the world. So we can have your in Azure, your third backup, your third SQL installation outside the region where you're working on. Like if I'm here in Austin today, I could be using South Central US, and I could have another region in West US having a copy, this particular infrastructure running there in standby of my production one. So this is what you get, right? You get a SQL engine, you get the SQL management node to connect to the SQL engine in this node in here. And Microsoft, we have the elements in there to replicate that node somewhere else. So if there is a hardware failure in this engine, the other node will take over. And like everything in the cloud, compute and storage are even though in SQL they are very coupled together, they are deployed in different services. So if the server fails, the storage is somewhere else. So the storage is always going to be there. So transaction consistency is always kept on top of it. And you don't have to worry about creating the load balancer. What is the load balancer here? You don't have to worry about creating the load balancer to figure out which node to send to, like that failover cluster I think we used to do, right? You don't have to worry about that. The load balancers take care of this for the client. So when a client comes in, it will just connect to the nodes that is up and running. And a very important element to notice in here is this whole thing is designed to work in a private setting, even though it's in a public cloud. Let me zoom in here once again, and I hope you don't get dizzy with all this zooming in. My mouse is not cooperating today. I apologize about that. Come on, stay there. Yeah. So if you notice here on the top left corner here, you'll see that there is a virtual network in Azure to support this whole thing, which means, this VNet thing here means that all the network traffic that's happening here is happening in a private set with private IP address. So this thing was really designed to work isolated from the public network and ideally connected to your on-premise network. So it's to support your on-premise workloads in the cloud. Now, can you have this thing facing the public internet? You can. It feels like it was not originally designed for that, because when you do that, you have to do some extra hops to expose the managed instance to the public cloud, so you can connect from anywhere. Yeah, so you can do that. Yes, you can. But the idea is to work on this privately, really privately. And let me show you that. Let me show you how that looks like. By the way, you don't see any of this. The only thing you see is the connection element in the managed instance. So I'm going to switch here to the portal so you can see this. If I go here to the portal, say I want to create a managed instance, I can come ahead and create. And I'm going to just browse here through the process so you can see that subscriptions, who's paying for this. So you pick a subscription and you create a resource group for that one. I think I put this one for this particular session. Yeah, give it a name, which data center you want it to run, and what kind of authentication you want to have on it. No big deal there, right? In terms of networking, if you want to see the VNet that I just mentioned, right here, it's not highlighting. There we go. So the virtual network is right here. So you can create a virtual network just for your managed instance, or have it running on a VNet that's already there, that's already connected to your on-premise elements, your on-premise network. And that's pretty much about it. Everything else, security is what kind of if you want Azure to monitor some elements of the managed instance. And here, additional settings like collation, which kind of collation you want to use, which time zone for your SQL agent jobs to refer to, and things like that. And if you want to, like I mentioned before, let me highlight it here, you can have that infrastructure replicated somewhere else in another data center with geo-replication. You don't get to choose exactly which region it goes to. There is a region parity that Microsoft implements depending where you deploy. So you can see the documentation if you deploy to a particular data center where the other copy will be. But then again, you have two physical copies, right, of everything of this managed instance somewhere else. A side note in here, every time you enable one of these things, you pay more, right? Nothing's given for free. So one of the most important skills for a cloud professional is to be able to predict costs. Because when you work on premise, you pay the license and you just pay for operations, right? Yeah, it has this big investment at the beginning with hardware and license, and then you don't pay much. I mean, you pay just for keeping the things going. In Azure or in any cloud platform, you usually start small because you just deploy one and then you deploy another, then deploy another, then you add the feature and you do geo-replication. And as you add stuff, your bill grows, usually exponentially, following your settings. So make sure you understand the price of everything. If I enable this, my price doubles almost. So you keep your eye on the price, right? So when I finish this and click review and create, this thing, right, this design here is deployed for me in Azure. And this takes a little while. So I'm not going to hit create there because it's going to take about, usually takes about 30 to 40 minutes for me. It may take a couple hours depending on which region I'm working on. So if you're planning to test this later, make sure you allow you some time. Like I deployed my one yesterday to show you guys yesterday because I need to save some money also in my credits. So I have one here ready to show you. And where is it? It's right here. I was trying to do some stuff in there. Let me see, go back in here. SQL 2022. there you go. So here is my managed instance, right? I believe you can see there. Here's my SQL managed instance that I have deployed. So that infrastructure there is right here waiting for me. And like I mentioned to you before, this managed instance is running on a VNet, on a particular VNet. I don't have any database. I did not create any database yet. So I'm going to show you that. Actually, can do the replication in a few. But here's the point, right? That whole infrastructure, I don't have to worry about any of this. Oh, what is it? I don't have to worry about any of these elements here. The only thing that exposed to me is the entry point to get connected to, and on a private setting. So I didn't even expose it to the public internet. I'm going to connect to it through a VM. All right, so yeah, so this is how it looks like. This is the elements in there, super simple, no big deal. So you guys are quiet. I believe there are no questions there. Magnus is just looking at the chat window, I believe. So let's keep going here. Yeah, so depending on what offering you come to choose when you are creating the VM, you can get it with more or less cores. And as you add cores, you have memory. There is a ratio between cores and memory. And you may or may not have replicated sites. So that was the demo. I want to just showed you how to create one and what how it looks like once it is deployed. Let's take a look at the service tiers. So when you're deploying, let me go back there to the portal so you can follow that. When you are deploying a managed instance, let me go back here to basics again. You see here, you have this thing here, the compute and storage. See over here, compute and storage. This is what I'm calling here, what is my slide? This is what I'm calling here your service tiers. So if I go into this guy, I can choose how much money I want to spend. Just a call out for money again. I can choose how much money I want to spend, but actually I'm choosing what is the backend, what's going to be, the horsepower in the backend supporting my managed instance. And of course, it all depends on your workload. And you can change this up and down after deployment. But when you change, it takes a little while to move the infrastructure to some larger hardware, right? So you may have some bumps while moving that. The switch time is like millisecond stuff, but during the process, it may take a little while to complete the upgrades. So these are your options in here, which kind of hardware you want to run your managed instance. If you want to support faster communication, right, throughput up in the cloud, so business critical offers you faster throughput in between database and the compute. And of course, here you pay both for compute and vCores. So if you need more space for your database, this is the total amount of space for all the databases. So if you have like 10 databases, sum the volume of them all, and you assign here. Usually in Azure for SQL database, you have a top limit of 4 terabytes, but for the managed instance, you can get up to 16 terabytes if you get larger vCores. Again, there is a ratio between vCores and storage. There is another Azure offering for SQL database that's not managed instance that can get to 100 terabytes, but that's for the data warehousing. We're not going to get there.
No, and it's also people with ridiculous amounts of money because it's expensive.
Yeah. On the hyperscale, storage is not that expensive. This one is, but storage over there is not that expensive. It's a good call, Magnus. This thing here, look at the price here. I'm running 24 cores with 16 terabytes. I'm at $7,000, $7,200 a month, right, to get this one going. So it can get expensive. But again, it's what you pay for that infrastructure, right? We have just seen. I just showed that on the slide. Yeah, so this slide here kind of summarize that, right? The amount of vCores you have in there, and some elements of business critical, mostly on top of IOPS. You get more IOPS, it's faster. And if you have something that's really, time sensitive, your applications are time sensitive and talk to SQL, you may look into a business critical. Look at the storage here that for you have a primary node, and this one here you have a primary node, a couple of secondaries on the same region where you are, and a read-only copy somewhere else in another region that's paired to the region you first deployed. So you have way more replicated data going over there, which means you have a more reliable infrastructure. It doesn't matter if you have 2, 3, 4 points of failures. They can always have some events that put everything down. But when you have an infrastructure like that, more likely you will be able to support catastrophic events. Azure from time to time, sometimes a region goes completely dark, and it happens. Microsoft learns, they fix, but you try to get as reliable as you can. So this is an expansion of the previous slide, just for you to understand how things work. You got your application running here. If you are running on general purpose over here, let me see if my Morpheus is using here. Someone told me already, stop moving the mouse like this. People get dizzy. And I have seen studies about that, and I completely agree. So let me see if this, okay, this is better. So you're running here on general purpose in here. And if you do this, you have your applications that are connecting to your managed instance in one particular region. And all the networking is controlled for you. So the application talks to the gateway that gives the specific endpoints for the application to talk to, and the application will leverage everything that's in there. One of the things to highlight about this one here, because we're talking about reliability, right? It's high availability and disaster recovery. Notice that your SQL Server instance, your managed instance, keeps the data on a premium storage here while serving the data, TempDB and the actual data files. And it's taking the backup for you automatically. You don't have to set up backup. I mean, I just say that, but if you stop and think about it, I don't have to worry about backup schedule, right? I don't have to worry about putting tape someplace or moving hard drives from place to place. This thing is done for me automatically. And if I want to, the only thing I need to set up, if it's required by my business, is to set up backup retention. So all SQL offerings, they will keep your backup for 30 days. So we can do point in time and restore for 30 days at any moment. But if you need to keep a backup, like for auditing and these things for like 5 years, then you have to set up backup retention, which is not backup. It's just to retain the backup the system is already taken. And if you do that, they are kept, the backup and the backup retentions, they're kept on storage elements that, again, you don't see, you don't manage. You just request the thing to be restored when you need it to be restored. I think if I go here to the portal, see, if I go back to my, where is my thing? Here. If I go back to my guy here, I should be able to see. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the virtual machine. Let me go back here to my resource group and then to my manage instance. I don't have a database here. If I had a database running, I could select that database, and there will be an option here for me to do a restore. Actually, if I go back here, I can still show that on another offering. Let me pick like this guy here. So you see, I don't have a button for backup, but I do have a button for restore. And if I click on this one here, the platform is just going to ask me, okay, how are you going to name your backup? I mean, the database once it's restored. You just give it another name, and you have to wait for the thing to restore, and then you have it done. So that's how easy it goes. All right, so that is that for, yes.
I guess one scenario that many organizations will have is like they have an emergency environment where they can troubleshoot stuff and test patches on a production database. So is it possible to take a database that is backed up by the service and restore it to another managed instance?
Well, the answer is yes. But I would recommend not to deploy to another managed instance because your budget will blow up.
Yeah.
you may want to restore it to another database in the same managed instance. Because then your cost doesn't vary, right? You're going to keep the same cost. You're going to share the compute with the new database, with the the database where you're going to do some tests. So if your test is going to be heavy, it's going to be a heavy workload test, then you may want to do another managed instance. Otherwise, I would suggest you run in the same managed instance on a particular time frame where it wouldn't disturb business, if that is your main deployment, right? Your main server. Yeah. Now, when it comes to patch, like you mentioned, it's a great question. Thank you for the question. When it comes to patch, because managed instance is managed by Microsoft, Microsoft keeps all the SQL patching for themselves. They do it, right? You don't control that. You don't manage that. They just deploy the patches there, and they keep they make sure that the things are don't break contract or version compatibility. If you're running a patch of your application, then of course, it's your application. You're gonna change stuff on the database, tables, whatever. Gonna deploy, make some sort of deployments for your application, but not on the infrastructure. That's the thing to keep in mind. The infrastructure is on Microsoft. The patching thing goes more into VM. Great question. Thank you. And this one here is just to make a contrast in between the business critical, which is this one, and the other one. When you see here business critical, you see you do have multiple nodes and multiple regions running at the same time, and there is a primary replica, there is a failover when that happens. Okay. Again, you can see more details about that in the documentation. This thing costs more, but it gets this ring of 4 nodes running through distinct regions to make sure that you have the most the most reliability possible on your deployment, avoiding system outages. And there is this guy here that has nothing to do with SQL itself. Where is my pen? Okay, it's writing. With this guy here, right? The traffic manager. Like if I have SQL Server, 2 managed instance in business critical, running on 2 distinct regions, so therefore I have 2 VNets, one for each region. When my website, when my application is going to connect to SQL, how is it going to choose to connect to a particular SQL? So that is outside SQL Server, right? So when you do business critical with this sort of support, you're gonna add some extra expenses here. You're gonna add some expenses in here because you have to tell your application to connect to the managed instance that's up and running, to the one that is the active one, the primary one. Because even though we have 2 of them running, only one is read and write, right? That thing doesn't change in SQL. Only one is read and write. The other one could be read only, but both are only one is read and write. So traffic manager needs to be in place in order to support applications. So this is just a call out for the traffic manager need for application support. All right, so for this demo here, what I want to trying to do was to connect to the managed instance. And to connect to the managed instance, I deployed a VM here. This is my managed instance. I had a VM here, but when I tried to connect to it, yes, it's not creating this. I end up having a connection issue. So let me try that again. If it doesn't work, I will record this later and show you some other time. So I created this VM here for this demo. And for some reason, my ARM template did not set up the thing right. I first tried this one here, gonna try this one again. So Bastion is a way of you to connect to a VM without doing RDP, right? It's through the web browser. It's a thing that Microsoft supports for VMs. So let me see if that goes. I tried it earlier, it failed. Yeah, I don't know what's doing this. I apologize. So let me try. So then I came in here and tried to do the RDP. So let's see if the RDP gets there. Oh man. Azure has checked the status of the most common prerequisites. IP address prerequisite not met. I do have a public IP address. I just added a thing. Public IP not there. I just added before we started this session because Bastion decided not to work. So I added it in here. Let me stop the virtual machine and see if I get that going. Sorry about troubleshooting this thing on the fly. It's not supposed to be like this. I will try it just once. If it doesn't go, public IP. But, yeah, I do have a public IP for you. IP configurations. There we go, public IP. Assign this public IP, public IP, public IP address. Yep, everything seems to be in place.
It's funny, I had this exact same, I was demoing the MI link and I had the exact same issue that I set up everything, I could connect to my VM, and then when I was doing the demo, it was just connectivity was gone.
Yeah, you gotta love, right? You gotta love it. I mean, if you are working a project, you have time to troubleshoot these things. I have these ARM templates that I deploy, and usually they work. For some reason, Bastion decided not to work this time around. And then I'm trying to get this public IP to get there. It says here private IP. Well.
It
Okay,
says it's
so
unassigned, so
yeah, this guy here. Associate to the public IP address. Oh yeah, so that's already there. I'm using that in the other one. All right, I'm not gonna waste time on this guy here. It doesn't want to work. I will just skip that demo. I try to do something similar. So yeah, this is assigned is associated. See, it is assigned. Why does it say it's not assigned? I'm missing something. We call this presentation blind. I'm focused on the presentation. My brain's trying to multitask, and I missed something very stupid in here, and I really can't see what. IP forward is not the thing. I don't need that.
the devil is in the demos. That's how it is.
Yeah, they don't like me. Cellular network, public IP, not in there. Go figure. Anyways, let me start this thing here again. And this is the thing. Because the yeah, now the VM is not running. Is it? Oh man, I think I broke the whole thing now.
I think it's stopping at the moment.
Deallocating is still going down. Gotta wait.
Yeah.
Anyways, another thing about the virtual machine. Oh, there you go. Now let's get started. Another thing about the virtual machine, not virtual machine, the managed instance is because the managed instance lives on a VNet. The only way to get to the managed instance is to be connected to the VNet. So I cannot just come in here like and call SSMS or Data Studio and connect to the managed instance I've deployed. If I want to do from my workstation that's connecting to the public IP address, I have to do a special setup on the managed instance to allow that connectivity. And even the TCP ports, they change. So it's designed to work on a VNet, on a segregated environment, again, for on-premise support, mostly for on-premise support in the cloud. One more try. No, it still doesn't like it. Sorry about that. I'm going to skip that demo. All right, so next thing thinking here is how to wrap it up, right? How the disaster recovery, the high availability and disaster recovery works. So the idea in here is to support the, is it in this slide here? No. So the idea here is to support the distributed availability group, right? That's what that's what happens here under the hood. What you have is you have your on-premise service going here, and you have all that infrastructure that I just mentioned to you and demo portion of it running up in the cloud. So this is on-prem, and this is Azure. And when you are in Azure, what you have in here is the managed instance we just discussed, right? Is your with all that infrastructure and the support and the the high availability that's in there. And the idea is you're gonna get your database, right? Remember that the distributed availability group is based on the database, not on the instance. So you're gonna choose the database you want to have that support, and SQL and the infrastructure will get that database pretty much working on a variation of distributed availability group of a DAG, and you have that database flowing the transactions, right, flowing from your on-premise into managed instance on the database of the managed instance. And here's the beauty, and it can only be done on the managed instance, because the managed instance is designed to support the data files and the data structures on the page level, the data file level that's running on premise. You can set up this to the managed instance. You cannot set this up for a regular SQL offering, like general purpose outside managed instance or hyperscale or something else. They don't replicate. The data is not, the data structure is not compatible. But for managed instance, you can actually do that, right? You can move the data there. You can actually, if you want, you can back up a database from on-premise and restore in the managed instance the same way. And then, having the replication going on. So that's why you need a managed instance if you want to do that disaster recovery. And if you do that, you actually end up with a scenario. If you decide to expose your managed instance to the public internet, you can have other public cloud services, including your applications that are running on a public IP address, to connect to that read-only copy that is in the cloud. So, for instance, if you're doing Power BI, let me erase a couple of these. I like to write on the, oops, I like to write on the screen, and sometimes I create a mess. Let me erase a couple of things in here, So yeah, so look at this. If you are leveraging Power BI, for instance, right? You have your applications. Here's the thing. Let's get the pen back. You have your client applications running here, doing all sorts of operations in the on-premise database. They're doing read and write, all the transactions are going on in there. And if you try to report from this guy here, from this one, you're going to have contention, right? Because there's writing going on there all the time. If you want to report something out of there or do a big query, you're going to create performance issues. And if you're like, I'm going to use Power BI for reporting, and I want to read a reasonable amount of data volume from the database, but I don't want to create contention. Because you are in a distributed availability group, you actually have a read-only copy of that database that is kept in sync, right, on the frequency you decide to set up in there. So you can do the reporting from here instead of from the on-premise without disturbing. So is that benefit you already know about the DAGs, about the distributed availability groups, but in the cloud, which means that Power BI doesn't have to go on-premise to read your data. If you connect, if either expose the managed instance to the public cloud, or if you put a gateway on the same VNet where managed instance is working, you're going to have the fastest possible connectivity between Power BI and your SQL Server database, and without any contention. So this is the best scenario you could have for any sort of reporting elements. And if you have cloud applications, of course, that are read-only, they can also take it from there, which is super cool. I know we are pressed on time, so I think I'm going to wrap it up from here. Yeah, there is an online failover element in there. If this one goes down, you can get this one to pick up for you. You can define the settings for that one. I will do the demo, but unfortunately, my thing is not connecting. I apologize for that. With that, we just, there is this table here that kind of summarize things. One of the things to keep in mind that will save you tons of time is this, right, for your backup site. This will save you tons of time in there. So it will cost you more, of course. I mean, it will cost you. And managed instance is the prices of the SQL offers that's out there, right? When you compare size by size, CPU by CPU. But what would be the cost if you have to have your own installation for this thing? I bet I have seen this in real world, your installation, the initial investment of your remote site to do this is going to be way higher than this one here. Over time, they tend to get close to each other. But again, you are always up to date on everything, hardware and software. So it has a pricey tag to it. But when you compare, when you balance these things, it tends to be better than have your own installation. But again, it's up to you to make that assessment, all right? With that, I'm gonna turn it over to Magnus and open for questions.
Yeah, so if anyone has questions, now is the time. My comment about, I like that it can be used as a DR, in a DR scenario. Basically, you have, I mean, another data center, someone else manages it, it's worth paying for. But for me, the real business case for me with this managed instance link, the distributed availability group, is the ease to migrate to the cloud from on-premise. Because you set it up, you test it, you can do all your read-only workloads, test them from Azure, set up your applications in Azure. When you have that read-only workload done, you can do the failover. It's more or less instantaneous, and then if things don't work, you're able to fail back, which was a kind of a deal breaker during the preview phase of SQL 2022, I guess, that now it's bi-directional, so you can fail back whenever you want.
True. Yeah, I did not mention that. Thank you.
But fail back basically, and so it's for a migration scenario, it's brilliant. I don't need to do the backup of a database and send it over and have that long downtime during migration. So,
yep. For applications that are not cloud born, this is perfect.
Yeah.
So this is the official documentation about that. If you want to try and go more in depth right, in this one here. I'm looking for my chat window here. I think chat window is here. There we go. I'm gonna place this here on the chat window if you guys want to see that. If you're watching this later on YouTube, right on the recording, just Google that title there. You're gonna find it there. But if you're here online, you can get the link in there. And just keep in mind that if you want to try this, you see this feature is still in public preview, so you have to contact Microsoft to enable the link to create that infrastructure for you with on-premise and the managed instance. And after that, you're good to go.
Yeah. And I think one of the cool things also is that you can do the copy-only backups from managed instance and actually restore them to Grandpa's old SQL server, as long as it's SQL 2022. So I think it's the first cloud database which you can actually back up and then restore on-premise. So, and maybe on-premise is not the use case, but you can put it in I mean, if you just want to spin up a SQL and have a production copy, just spin up a container, test whatever you need to test, and run your scripts. And when it works, you just kill the container and run the scripts on production. So it's
cool, right? It's not that you do that all the time. You don't get anything in the cloud and pull it down to on-premise. But if in the past, you were not even allowed to do it. Now you have the option if you want to.
Yeah, so it's I sometimes say that I live in the future because like you, I had the task to go down to the data center and pick up the tapes and put it in my bag and bring them back home just so they were light when I left the office. And those days are gone, and I'm really happy about it. When you were
Me
out,
too.
you had to install the physical disk in the server.
Yeah, I'm happy about this too, and my wife is happier because in the past I used to have this server farm in a garage, and
Yeah,
you could hear the fans from the living room, you know.
that's true. Yeah, life became easier, and also like sure it costs some money, but I can split up a pretty big and potent cluster of any kind and just do any workload I want. And when I'm done, I just kill it, and it costs nothing. So the upfront cost is nothing, and when I'm done, I can just tear it apart. So it's for
The
yeah.
benefits of the cloud, pay as you go, is great.
Yeah, it's nice. And then I think in the end you will, if you keep it up and running 24/7, you're going to pay more in the end. But you're going to have the flexibility that you didn't have before. So
Yeah.
it's going to be worth it, I think.
And again, if you're running 24/7, it's because your business is running 24/7. So it's creating the revenue, supporting revenue in a way. So it's
True,
cost of doing business. Yep.
true. All
All right.
right.
So thank you again for having me here. It was fun.
Thank you for coming. If you're coming to Pass Summit in November again, it's going to be in person only this time. So if you're going, I think I will be. So let's meet up
We're gonna
and
meet there.
have a beer or something.
Sounds great. Let's go to Hard Rock Cafe and have something there.
That's good. Thank you for coming. I'm going to go back to some paid work.
Oh
Next
yeah, there's that. Gotta work.
Next week, the schedule says Chrissy Lemaire is going to come. Unfortunately, she cannot make it. So it's going to be Daniel Hutmacher from Sweden, who is actually the co-organizer of SQL Friday. He's going to present a presentation called Get Your Ducks in a Row, which has to do with basically how the different types of joins in an execution plan, how good or bad they handle ordered and unordered data coming into them. So
Nice.
it's kind of an introductory session, but it gives a very good insight into what is a hash match and what is a nested loop join and the merge join and stuff like that. So if you're interested in understanding the insides of an execution plan, that's going to be a good session, I think.
It's always good to learn these things.
Yep. So
All right. Thank you again. I'll see you next time.
Good luck on Data Saturday tomorrow then.
All right. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.